Okay, so today we're going to go over list comprehensions. And what list comprehensions are is they provide a concise way for us to create lists that we typically would have created using a for loop. So let's talk about the parts of a list comprehension. So first off, we have this for loop type expression, for name in iterating expression. So what this does is it sort of creates a for loop for us to run through while creating this list. As we go through, we set x, looking at this example, we set x equal to 1 in the first iteration. Then after we've completed that iteration, the first iteration, then we set x equal to 2. Then once we've completed that iteration, we set x equal to 3, 4, and 5, and so on. Okay, so now let's talk about what happens in each iteration of a list comprehension. So first off, we have a condition to check whether or not we're actually supposed to do anything. And that falls under this if filter expression. So now if this filter expression is true, then we're going to want to add something to our list. If it's false, then we're just going to do nothing and we're going to skip on to the next one. So in the case of if x mod 2 equals 1, when we first run through our for loop, we have x equal to 1, so 1 mod 2 is equal to 1. So we're going to want to do something. And I'll talk about what we're going to do in just a little bit. But then if x mod 2 is not equal to 1, if this if expression is false, if it evaluates to false, then in the example of 2 mod 2 equals 1, that is false. So we're just going to skip that entirely. And we're just going to go to x equals 3. So now, what are we actually outputting to our list? What are we actually doing during each iteration? Well, that falls under this map expression. As we go through our iterating expression, we set x equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If this filter expression is true, then I'm going to output the map expression to my list. So in this example, the first time we go through our for loop, we have x equals 1. So we check if x mod 2 is equal to 1. It is. So that condition is true, so we're going to want to output something to our list. So we now have, we want to output 1 times 1, because x is equal to 1 in this case, minus 3. So that just gives us negative 2. So the first element in the output of our list is going to be negative 2 right here. So now we've completed the first iteration of our loop when we set x equal to 1. Now let's set x equal to 2. Okay, so we check, the first thing we do is we check our filter expression and we say 2 mod 2 is equal to 1. This is false, so we're not going to do anything. We're just going to completely skip this iteration of the loop. So the next thing that we can do is we're going to set x to 3. So now we check our condition. If 3 mod 2 is equal to 1, it is. 3 is an odd number. So that means we're going to want to output 3 times 3 minus 3, which in this case is just 6. So that gives us the second element of our output. And we can continue doing this. 4 is even, so we don't do anything. Then we set x to 5. 5 is odd, so we are going to want to output something to our list. And then we can return 5 times 5 minus 3, which just gives us 22. And once we have completed going through our list, then we finish our list comprehension. So as we've run everything inside of this list, this expression altogether evaluates to this final, negative 2, 6, 22 list. Okay, so now let's go over some questions. So how do we supposed to approach these questions? Well, we just can run through the for loop, check the if condition, and then go to our map expression, the output. So let's start it off. So first we have I equals 1. So we have I equals 1. Then we can do our condition check. If 1 mod 2 is equal to 0. In this case, 1 mod 2 is not equal to 0, so we skip it. So now let's move on to I equals 2. So is 2 mod 2 equal to 0? Yes, it is. So we're going to want to output something to our list. And in this case, we're going to want to output 2 plus 1. So we just put 3 into our final list. So we continue along. We check if 3 mod 2 is equal to 0. It isn't, so we don't do anything. Then we check if 4 mod 2 is equal to 0. It is, so we're going to want to output something to our list. In this case, we're going to want to output I plus 1. So we're going to want to output, we're going to want to output 4 plus 1. So we output 5. We check if 5 mod 2 is equal to 0. It isn't, so we don't, we're done. So we can just close off this list, and we realize that this entire list comprehension gives us the list 3, 5. So let's continue on to the next one. For I in 5, -1, 3, -1, 3. So what first we do is set I equal to 5. We check if 5 is greater than 2. It is. So we're going to want to output 5 times 5. So we output 25. We then set I equal to -1. Is -1 greater than 2? It isn't, so we can skip it. We set I equal to 3. Is 3 greater than 2? Yes, it is. So we can output 3 times 3, which gives us 9. Then we can follow the same exact process for the next two. We don't output anything for -1, and we output 3. Or we output 9 when we hit 3. Now we've run through the entire list, so we've created this list of 25, 9, 9. Okay, the next one is a little bit more complicated because we have a list comprehension nested within another list comprehension. And you'll notice here that neither of these have an if condition or a filter condition, which is totally okay. What happens in this case is that we just output something for every single time. The if condition, if you will, always evaluates to true. So the way we need to think about this is that this y times 2 for y in x plus 1, this is the map expression for the larger list comprehension of 4x in 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through x in 1, 2, 3, 4 first. And then, for each iteration of x in 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to run through this y list comprehension. So let's start off. Okay. So we first set x equal to 1. Okay. There's no if condition here, so we're definitely going to output something to this list I have. But then we go in and we see that we have this other list comprehension. So what we do, so we just run through this other list comprehension as we normally would. So we have y, and we have y in x and x plus 1. And in this case, if x is 1, then we have 1 and 2. So the first time that we go through this list comprehension, we're going to have y equals 1. So what does this list comprehension output? Well, it's going to be a new list, right, because we have a new list comprehension. So we're going to output 1 times 2. So we have 2, and then we're going to output 2 times 2 because we've now set y equal to 2. So we have 4. So the output of this first list comprehension, where we set x equal to 1 and we ran through this entire list comprehension here, gives us another list, 2, 4. So we can just write in 2 and 4. Okay, so we have a nested list in this case because list comprehensions, they always create a new list. So we have this outer list comprehension that contains the 4x statement, and this is going to give us a list. But then we also have this nested list comprehension, which is going to give us another new list. So we have this outer list, which corresponds to the 4x in 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have this inner list, which is going to correspond to the y times 2. And as we go forward, we'll see that the y times 2 is run for each x in 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to end up having 4 nested lists. So let's move on. So we set x equal to 2. So now we have 4y in 2 and then 2 plus 1. So we have 2 and 3. So this is going to output 2 times 2, which is 4, and then 3 times 2, which is 6. So now we know the output of the second term of our x, 4x list comprehension. It's 4 and 6. Then we go forward and we say that x is equal to 3. And we can continue the same pattern. We now have y in 3, 4, because we have x and then x plus 1. And this is going to output 3 times 2 and then 4 times 2, which is 6 and 8. All right. So then we can just know what happens in the last one when x equals 4. We're just going to have y in, we're going to have y in 4 and 5, which we know will give us 8, 10. So now we've run through everything in the x list comprehension, and that's the last thing I had to do. So we're done. So now this nested list comprehension gave us a list of lists with 2, 4, 4, 6, 6, 8, and then finally 8, 10. Okay, so now let's try writing our own list comprehension. Let's try to define a function foo that takes in a list and returns a new list that keeps only the even indexed elements of list and multiplies each of these elements by the corresponding index. So let's walk through that with an example. So we can think of the list x of having the indices 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? So we're going to want to walk through the indices, right? We're going to want to walk through the even indexed elements. Notice that we're not looking through the even elements, in which case we would be looking through 2, 4, and 6. But we want to look through the even indexed elements. We want to look through the elements that have index 0, 2, and 4. And we're going to multiply each of those elements by the corresponding index. So we're going to multiply 0 and 1, we're going to multiply 2 and 3, and we're going to multiply 4 and 5, which gives us 0, 6, and 20. Okay, so now let's think about how we can write this in an actual list comprehension. So we know that there are three parts to this list comprehension. There's going to be the map, there's going to be the for loop, and there is going to be the filter, the if. Okay, so what do we want to iterate through in this case? As I said, we don't want to iterate through the actual elements of this list. We want to iterate through the indices of this list. So what we're going to do is we're going to iterate over for I for index, indice, in the range of length of list. So what this is going to do is, as we go through our for loop, the first time we're going to set I equal to 0 because that's the first element in the range of the length of the list. And then as we go through, we're going to say I equals 0, then I equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as that is the last element of the range of the length of the list. Okay, so now let's think about our if condition next. When are we going to want to output something to our final list? We're going to want to output something to our final list when we have an even index. So how do we determine if this index is even? Well, it's just going to be if the index mod 2 is equal to 0. And what is the index? The index is I. It's what we're iterating over. So all I have to do is say if I mod 2 equals 0. So if the index is even, then I'm going to want to output something to my list. Okay. So now what are we going to be outputting to our final list? We're going to be outputting each of these elements, the elements, by the corresponding index. So how do we figure that out? Well, the index is easy. We can just say I. We know how to get the index. So then how do we get the element out of at index I from the list? Well, we can just say times list of I. And that gives us the value at index I, the element at index I, and we're going to take that product. Okay, so now we've determined the map, the for loop, and the filter. So we can just put these all together in a single list comprehension. So what we're going to return is I times list of I for I in range of length of list if it is even, if I mod 2 equals 0. And with that, we've written our final list comprehension. And we've defined the function foo in what normally would have been several lines in just a simple one-line return statement.